Okay, we're going to continue on in the Apocrypha. This is the prelude to the book of Judith. The conjecture and the history into which such an encouraging example of fortitude against overwhelming odds and of the efficacy of dietary observance would fit into the struggle against Antiochus Epiphanes recounted in the book of Maccabees. It may be significant that the heroine's name is the feminine Judah, which was the name of a Maccabean hero, and no king before Antiochus would have insisted on recognition of his own divinity, as Nebuchadnezzar is here reported to have done. Now this is the book of Judith. In the 12th year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, who ruled over the Assyrians in the great city of Nineveh, in the days when Arphaxad ruled over the Medes in Asbania, Arphaxad built around Asbania walls of hewn stone, 4.5 feet wide and 9 feet long. He built the walls 105 feet high and 75 feet wide. And at the gates, he built towers 150 feet high, with foundations 90 feet wide. And he made its gates that rose to a height of 105 feet and were 60 feet wide, so that his host of warriors could march out and his infantry could form. So in those days, King Nebuchadnezzar made war on King Arphaxad in the Great Plain. This plain is on the borders of Ragay. He was joined by all the inhabitants of the hill country and all who lived along the Euphrates and the Tigris and the Hydaspes, and on the plains of Arok, king of Elamus, and many nations joined the army of the Chaldeans. Then Nebuchadnezzar, king of Assyria, sent to all the inhabitants of Persia and to all who lived toward the west, who were settled in Sicilia and Damascus and in the Lebanon and the Antibaran, and to all who lived along the seacoast, to the inhabitants of Carmel and Gilead that were heathen, and to Upper Galilee and the great plain of Esdragon, and to all that were in Samaria and its towns, and beyond Jordan, as far as Jerusalem and Bethane and Chiloas and Kadesh, and the river of Egypt, Taphanes and Ramses, and all the land of Goshen, until you pass Tanis and Memphis, and to all who lived in Egypt, until you reach the borders of Ethiopia. But all the inhabitants of the land paid no attention to the command of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Assyria, and would not go with him to war, for they were not afraid of him, but regarded him as a single man. And they sent his messengers back disappointed and in disgrace. Then Nebuchadnezzar was very angry, that whole country, and he swore by his throne and his kingdom that he would certainly take vengeance upon all the regions of Sicily, Damascus, and Syria, and kill with the sword all the inhabitants of the land of Moab, and the Amorites, and all Judea, and everybody in Egypt, until you come to the coast of the two seas. So in the 17th year, he made war on King Arphaxad, and he overcame him, and put Arphaxad's whole army and all his cavalry and all his chariots to flight. And he took possession of his cities and reached Ecbatana, and he took its towers and plundered its bazaars and turned its glory into shame. Then he took Arphaxad captive among the mountains of Ragay and struck him down with his spears and utterly destroyed him until this day. Then he returned with the spoils and all his motley army and a very great body of soldiers. There in his army they took their ease and feasted for 120 days. In the 18th year of his reign, on the 22nd day of the first month, it was proposed in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Assyria, to take vengeance on all the land. For just as he said, he called together all his ministers and all his nobles and set before them his secret purpose, and fully related all the wickedness of the land with his own lips. And they decreed that all who had not obeyed the command of the king had uttered should be destroyed. When he had completed his plan, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Assyria, summoned Hophernes, the general of his army, who was second to himself, and said to him, Thus says the great king, the Lord of all the earth, when you go from my presence, you must take with you men confident in their strength, to the number of 120,000 infantry and 12,000 mounted men. And you must go out and attack all the western country, because they have disobeyed the command that I uttered. You must call upon them to prepare earth and in water, in token of submission, for I will go against them in my anger, and I will cover the whole face of the earth with the feet of my army. And I will give them up to them to plunder, and their ravines will be filled with their wounded, and every brook and dashing river will be filled with their dead. And I will send them as captives to the ends of all the earth. But you must go and take all their frontiers from me in advance, and they must give themselves up to you, and you must hold them for me till the day of their punishment. But as far as those who disobey, your eye must not spare them, but you must give them up to be slain and plundered in all your land. For as surely as I am alive by the power of my kingdom, I have spoken and will do with this my hand. You must not transgress any of your Lord's commands, but you must carry them out in full, as I have ordered you to do, and you must not put off doing them. So Holofernes left his master's presence and called in all the marshals and generals and officers of the Assyrian army. And he mustered picked soldiers, as his master had ordered him to do, to the number of 120,000 and 12,000 mounted archers. And he marshaled them as a great army is marshaled. He took camels and asses and mules, an immense number, for their transport, and sheep and cattle and goats without number to provision them, and food in abundance for every man, besides a great deal of gold and silver from the king's palace. And he set off with his entire army to go ahead of King Nebuchadnezzar and to cover the whole face of the land toward the west with their chariots and horsemen and picked foot soldiers. And there went out with them a motley host, like locusts, like the dust of the earth. They could not be counted, there were so many. They marched 3 days' journey from Nineveh to the edge of the plain of Beclith, and they encamped opposite Beclith, near the mountains, that is to the north of Upper Sicilia. And he took the whole army, his infantry and cavalry and chariots, and moved them into the mountainous country, and ravaged Put and Lud, and plundered all the sons of Rassus and the sons of Ishmael, who lived along the desert to the south of the country of Chelon. Then he crossed the Euphrates and passed through Mesopotamia and tore down all the high-walled towns on the river Abron until you come to the sea. He took possession of the frontiers of Sicilia and cut down all who resisted him, and went as far as the south frontiers of Japheth, facing Arabia.